we were making decisions based on what we thought was right, instead of taking the time to invest in understanding the data behind what could make that the best decision. Let's see what people are talking to us about. Let's see what feedback they have. And then we have the data to support why we're investing that time and the impact that we think it's going to have. So even when we're taking a data-driven approach to things, it still does have that human element.
You're listening to HR Superstars, a podcast brought to you by 15 Fives. On this show, we talk to strategic people leaders who are making a meaningful impact in their organizations and shaping the future of work. So get ready to be inspired and discover the secrets behind building high-performing teams and fostering a culture of growth and thriving. The future of HR starts here. Hello and welcome to the HR Superstars podcast. I'm your host, Karina Young, and we're here to connect with the world's leading innovators in the HR and people space who want to get real with us by sharing their life stories, actionable insights, and practical advice to help all of us get better in our craft and make an impact through our work. So I get asked a lot about what skills do people leaders need to focus on for 2025, 2026, the years ahead. And two of the biggest things that constantly top my list are data literacy and financial acumen. They are the skills that we as people leaders have got to be building and have to be better at, right? Like think of them as the yellow bricks in your journey to strategic HR, minus all the poppy fields and flying monkeys, but maybe with the cast of Wicked, because that would, I think, maybe make all of our jobs a little bit more fun. But 2024 musicals aside, when push comes to shove and we all have to show up to our organizations to help scale them effectively, be strategic leaders, understand and drive impact, these are areas that even I am trying to improve. And why I am so lucky and so happy to invite our guest here today, Brittany Rohde, to talk to us about her unique background and how she's doing all the things that we talk about here in real life in her company. How is this actually showing up and playing out? Brittany is the head of people at Monarch Money, where she gets to focus on scaling teams, crafting impactful people programs, and fostering environments that drive both individual and company success, that beautiful, incredible duo. So the wealth of experience Brittany's got helping companies like GitLab and Camunda navigating significant growth, she really brings a strategic people-first approach to startup culture. And outside of work, Brittany is just like us. She spends time with her family, her husband and 3 kids, and in true post-pandemic fashion, her office assistant, Rainier, who, if we're lucky, this beautiful golden retriever might make a pop-up showing during the podcast. Welcome, Brittany. So happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be here and excited to chat with you more today.
Yeah. So Brittany, start us off with, give me your kind of 30-second pitch of your career journey. Where did you start and how did you end up where you are today?
Yeah. Well, I started where so many of us do, which is I went to college and said, I have no idea what I want to be when I grow up. And we all go and, we have great plans laid out ahead of us. And I changed my major 3 times. I met my husband in college, who I'm so grateful to have started my journey with him in life at that point in time. And he was a huge influence on me. But I ended up majoring in math because I liked it and I didn't know what else to choose. And that coincidentally led me into HR in a very non-traditional path, like many of us find, by first working as a payroll specialist at a manufacturing company, doing a little bit of everything. And then when I realized that I needed to take the next step in my career because my husband and I were relocating for his job, I was on a hunt for a remote opportunity. And this was, circa 2015, when remote jobs were not as available. And if they were, it wasn't for HR professionals. And I was fortunate enough to find GitLab, join them when they were a small Series A company. I was, person 50 or so, first person on the people team, and being able to grow with them post IPO and then continue to build my career after that into some other amazing organizations like Camunda and now at Monarch. It's been a really fun way to just build different skills and be able to contribute to all different types of companies and programs and initiatives based on what's happening at the time.
I love how all of us have like some starting point that has nothing to do with where we are now. But when you kind of look back, you're like, no, it actually makes sense. Like that actually worked out pretty well. How did that math background for you influence your transition going into GitLab, like moving into that space? Was there kind of a certain moment that sparked something for you of like, this is something I want to try or I'm interested in?
The hiring manager, when I started at GitLab, he had a really interesting title and role. He was our VP of scaling. And his job was to build out different parts of the business, hire in those leaders that would take it from there, and then he'd move on to the next business vertical. And one of the things we connected on was my math background. He had a advanced degree in mathematics, saw my potential in that I was still very junior, but was willing to come in, roll my sleeves up, and do whatever the business needed. And one of the first projects that we partnered on was the GitLab compensation calculator, which at the time was one of the first fully transparent, open, access informational systems into how do you compensate people globally? How do you make sure that it's equitable, that it's fair, and do it in a way where people have all the information themselves also. And this also predates many of the pay transparency laws that we have now. But how I got to work on that project was just raising my hand and saying, I come from a math background. I think comp could be fun. Let's see what we can do, not knowing it would become the niche of my career for the next many years after that.
When you moved into comp, what surprised you most about digging into that world? Something that was unexpected for you?
Yeah, I think the thing that really surprised me was there isn't a right answer. There's no right comp philosophy. There's no best way to do it. It's how do we build a comp philosophy and a rewards system and structure that attracts the people we need to build the business that we're looking to build and retains them in a way that it's not a distraction and that they feel as though it's fair, it's equitable, and it makes sense. And it seemed like something much harder than it was until I started digging into that. And it's really one of the most human things you can think of. It's the economic reason why people come to work every day. And so being able to play a part in shaping how that can look, for the next generation, or especially as COVID hit and remote started becoming even more common, that landscape changed even more. It was a really fun area to be able to dig into and learn more about.
That's really cool. Well, I love that human approach that you have to it, or the lens that you take on it, because it is actually like one of the most personal, individual things we do in the people function, right? Is total rewards, compensation, how we pay people. What does that mean for their life outside? But it can feel sometimes like such a removed part of the group, or something like too mathematical, too complicated for anyone else. So I really love that merriment of those two things for you, your technical skill, but also that passion for people. And yeah, you got to practice all these things years before states were mandating pay transparency, and we were all trying to figure out geolocation pay and all that stuff. So that is absolutely amazing. So talk to me a little bit about your role now at Monarch Money. Like what has that transition been like from GitLab to Camunda to Monarch, and what are you really excited about and trying to do in your role now?
Yeah, well, I left GitLab once we became a public company. It was a really fun journey to be on. And I'm so appreciative to be able to be part of something like that, going from Series A through to post being public. And after we went public, I started to really get that itch to build. I think about talent as architects, builders, or operators. And I definitely fall into the builder category. I love to be able to take someone's vision and move it into that next phase of making it best in class. And so I went to Camunda. I had a contact from GitLab that had gone over there, a former manager who I absolutely adored and loved to partner with, and was able to help build Camunda from about 250 people up to about 500. But I still had that itch even more. And, I thought 250 would feel small after being at close to 2,000. But I ended up having an opportunity at Monarch, and I was connected to our CEO through a mutual contact, got to know him, got to understand what type of personal finance management platform that we're building here and what the goals were for the business long term. And I jumped at the opportunity to be able to be an early employee, hopefully go through the same type of journey of building and scaling, but on a platform that I just feel so passionate about. And to be able to have a product that aligns so well with my values, a mission that I feel so closely attached to. It's been a real blessing to be able to do that for the last 6 months. And we're entering into the scale phase now as well. So growing from about 30 when I joined, we're about 50, and we're looking to significantly increase from here, and part of setting up all of the foundational components of that.
Awesome. Yeah, that's such a cool synergy of all these things coming together for you in this role, like your background, your passions, the product being something that you're connected to. So as you're thinking about scaling for Monarch and for what you've done for other organizations in the past, I think one of the toughest areas when it comes to scale is culture, right? Especially when you join an org in those early days, the 10s, 20s, 50s. It is so tight and so connected, and moving from that into the hundreds requires a lot of intention and thought, right? People think it just happens naturally. And I think that is the outcome of really great work, right? Is that you don't really notice, like you go to a party and you're like, this is wonderful. And someone's like crying in the back because the original cake fell and all that stuff. Like it takes a lot of work to scale culture really, really well. So tell me a little bit about the challenges you've seen and faced in terms of scaling culture during rapid growth and how you've navigated that successfully. What are some of the things that have worked best for you?
Yeah, I mean, you're building the car while you're driving it, and that's part of the issue of scale is you are trying to figure out what the best thing is to do next, what the most impactful thing is, but not lose that human element that we talked about. And so that's a huge risk factor in that rapid growth is, am I going to create something that's going to last past the stage and size we are now? And am I also going to be creating a product that when we look back at 150, 500, 2,000, we're proud of. And we're bringing in and attracting talent that aligns to what we're looking for long term. And some of the ways, I've combated that is being very intentional about how much we automate early on. It can feel really easy to bring in more people into, the people space, into other departments. We have more work, we need more people. Well, maybe not necessarily. Maybe if we're going to scale and we're going to grow, there's an opportunity for us to leverage automation, to leverage engineers in a way that, they have this amazing skill of creating amazing products. We can do that on the people side too, and eventually have something where we don't have to add headcount at the same rate that we're growing. We can add headcount when it is a very impactful new role that we're opening or a program that we're going to start running. And the person in the role is likely going to be much more excited to be working on something they're building than constantly maintaining what we've already started to set up.
Yeah, well, that's such an interesting perspective to take on it too, of thinking about automation, because I feel like a lot of folks, especially leaders in organization, you tell them that, hey, you've got headcount, here it is, we're growing. It's just like, oh, okay, well, give me 10 more too. Like I want all these things done. How do you help managers and organizations take a step back too? Like, are there any strategies you found to be really helpful to even slow down the way they think about bringing in that really impactful talent?
Yeah, it's a traditional way, but asking the why, and not just why once, right? The approach of the 5 whys. What are you actually looking for here? And whenever I'm, strategically partnering, it's really to understand what are they trying to solve? And maybe what they're trying to solve, I don't know yet, and they might not even know yet. So how do we break it down into pieces where we can figure out exactly what it is that they need? And maybe the way that they're thinking of building it, it may have worked at past companies. It may have worked in, the way that they've traditionally done this, but maybe with where we're going, we want to take a new approach to it. And so being a thought partner to them, being able to see, how can I help you do that in a way that maybe is outside of your comfort zone? We can all just end up building something that's a little bit more unique. And not to say that the traditional way isn't the right way, but if we ask those whys enough time, we'll know for sure whether it is or isn't.
It was like what you were talking about earlier on the compensation front, right? You can have compensation look many different ways in many organizations. It's not just one right thing. So it's, maybe traditional does work, but you have to know why it's going to work here and what your plan and hypothesis is. And it's asking why over and over again in a way that doesn't necessarily shut the leader off, but you're like, I promise you we're getting somewhere good. There is a gem at the bottom of this why trail for sure.
Absolutely. And a great way to build trust with the leaders. Being able to have those conversations and push the leader on those whys will eventually, when they have something they're uncertain of, they know they have that business partner they can come to and just bounce an idea off of, just be able to have that safety net. And so much of what we build on the people side is trust, right? Trust with our employees that we're building programs that are fair to them, that are going to help engage them and grow them in their careers, but also trust with our leadership team that when we're, going through the good times of a business and also the harder times of a business, that we're a partner that can help really brainstorm what the right area is. And it's not always just in HR programs. Those can be business initiatives. We have a huge opportunity of seeing the business from a much broader view. And so being able to put some of those pieces together for leaders as a partner is a huge way to just make everything run a little bit more smoothly.
Absolutely. And so what's been your tactic when you are scaling culture? How do you want to empower leaders, employees to be a part of that? Like, what are the ways that you see them having responsibility in that journey and in that growth?
Yeah, in so many ways, there are times when we're afraid to take our employees along the journey with us because it's hard. right? Like we're figuring it out as we go. And so the thought of bringing employees along as we're figuring it out can be very intimidating. And people have strongly held opinions about many of these different topics. One of my approaches has always been not to be afraid to bring people along with you, even if it's harder or it adds a little bit of extra overhead. That transparency of people seeing not only what you're building, but when you plan to launch it and how you're building it can be a really powerful way to, really create buy-in early on. But also when you get to launch, you're not dealing with the ramifications of someone disagreeing. You can point to all the different touch points where maybe they could have provided feedback or they could have had a discussion with you about those strongly held opinions. And that can really help to make much more successful launches where it's the idea generation that becomes the kickoff for any program as opposed to the final launch and the final product.
Such a great strategy. And I'm thinking about that because oftentimes when we are creating those ideas or we have someone comes and says, great, we need to do X, Y, or Z. We're growing by 50 people this year, Brittany. And we've also got to find a way to maintain these, pillars, this tribal knowledge of our company. These events that we do are special. It's okay, the people team might get in a room and do it, but forgetting to invite others in that room too, that we often say, we are not the owners of culture. It is not on our shoulders to do it, create it, scale it as everybody. So why not bring people in very early on in that process and let them be a part of it? Let them help you with being a change maker. And to your earlier point too, even on capacity, I always find that when I go into organizations that are small and we have limited headcount as a people team, my first thought on resources is what can our employees do? If I don't have time or capacity to launch a program, someone else is passionate about it. Amazing. What can I do to help and support you and give you the resources to be really a change agent for what we're doing in the people team too? There's a lot of different ways that we can think about that.
Well, and also a champion once it's launched. If you feel like you have some skin in the game on what was built and the decisions that we made, it's not then just the program leader from the people team that's championing that. It's an engineer or a product manager or a marketer that's that was my idea. I actually think this is great. And let me tell you why. And in a lot of those conversations that maybe we're not privy to, sometimes we're the first people to know things. Sometimes we're the last people to know things. Both are equally okay. But in the situations when we're the last to know, it's helpful to have that additional culture, those culture carriers that are bringing along the why and helping to explain to people who maybe weren't part of those conversations or weren't as involved. And it's not always the people team being on the defense. It's much more of a collaborative business unit building something together. And again, it's hard to do. I'm not going to say that that's the easiest approach. It can be a lot easier to roll out something, you feel like it's perfect, and then you launch it and get feedback. But in the long term, it is much more worthwhile.
Exactly. Well, and where you can, I feel like those big change launches that we have to do, the connection to it is happening in small conversations that we are not a part of, right? It's who are you eating lunch with, Zooming lunch with, who are you chatting with on Slack, what somebody's saying in a meeting. If you can have the people show up in that meeting to be no, this is actually really great. Hey, maybe there's other context I can share with you on this, or this is why it's so important for our team, what we're doing. That is going to amplify the value in any program that you run versus you trying to be the one people person telling everybody and getting everybody on board with it. That's just not scalable. It just doesn't work like that. We can only do so many things.
Exactly. And at the end of every launch or whenever we're sort of wrapping up bringing a new program or a foundational idea to the business, I always love to have an AMA because it gives the vulnerability from the people team to be able to answer any unfiltered question. What are you thinking of? Sometimes we go off topic, of course. There might be something else we're thinking of, but it's a great opportunity to build that personal connection. The AMAs that are most successful, in my opinion, are the ones where it's not just the person leading the AMA that's answering the questions. It's other people jumping in the chat. It's people saying, oh, hey, I have a thought on this, or I provided this feedback in the past, and here was the answer. And you just start to feel that cohesion and that real sense of unity among a company where when you're scaling quickly, that's the key pillar, is being able to all do it together in the same way, on the same page. And of course, we're not always going to have that. There's going to be certain topics that we have to disagree and commit on or move forward. But it's a very healthy way to build that culture without one person leading that charge alone.
And what would you say to people, Brittany, who get fearful of the AMA, of what if I open this up and someone asks a question I don't know how to answer? I don't want to answer. How much of the truth do I tell them? What advice would you give to HR leaders who feel hesitant about those kind of forums?
People much more prefer the I don't know, because it's okay not to know. My very first interview I had with my CEO at GitLab, he asked me a question about marketing the product. And I'll never forget this because it was a very pivotal moment in my career where I realized it's okay to say I don't know. He asked me a question on how I would market the product. I had no idea what GitLab was at the time. I didn't know what the product was. It's a developer tool. I was not a developer. So I came up with an answer that was, not wrong, but generic. And he said, he looked at me and he said, okay, that's fine. Next time, just say you don't know, because I wouldn't expect you to know. And in that moment, I was like, okay, it's okay not to always have an answer to everything. And in those AMAs, that's another way that I approach that, is being able to say, I don't know when I don't know, being able to, say, let me look into that and come back to you. That's also totally okay. And if it's a question where we know that there's not a positive answer, just be honest with our employees. They'd much prefer the transparency of saying, we recognize that that's not maybe the same experience you've had that somebody else had. We recognize that, let's talk about it more. Or we recognize that this isn't an easy answer. And so let us put some time and thought into it and come back to you. Or even if it's just a hard no, like, no, that's not something we can consider. Let's say in an AMA about comp, someone asks for a new benefit that just isn't typical for the stage and size we are, or we don't have the funding for it. It's okay to say that's not a benefit we offer at this time, but we'll consider it in the future. And you don't have to give a lot of the why. You don't have to feel like you need to explain yourself, but just being transparent and forthright, it has a huge power, and it does build more trust than you think it does, even if in the moment it feels very unnatural and uncomfortable.
Yeah, even if it feels scary, it's worth the risk. It is definitely worth the risk. And to your point, knowing where you can say, I don't know, but I'm going to follow up with you, versus just no. Not now, not today. Like, understanding that for you as a people team. I think if that's hard for people teams to do that, that's probably a good signal that you need to have more transparent conversations in your own function or with your own leadership of, do we have a shared approach? Can I go out and say this confidently and know that, my team or my leaders will back me? So thinking about AMAs, right? Because now I think there's a lot of AMAs too, especially as we're in a more remote environment. More companies are hybrid or fully remote, although some go back to office. You were early in those stages with GitLab, being a remote organization and thinking about that. Tell me about some of the unique things you've done when it comes to building a real authentic team connection and team environment when you aren't face-to-face.
Yeah, there is no replacement fully for in-person time. And the learning that we had in those early years was that the in-person time should feel intentional, and it should be about building connection. We can work for days synchronously or asynchronously on projects or what our goals are or how we're going to achieve those. That's something that people have gotten used to, and we're able to do that. You can't replace those moments of grabbing lunch with a colleague that you see in person once a year. And so one of the areas that I always advocate for is having offsites, whether it's the whole company, whether it's just your team, whoever it might be. Those offsites are so important, but make them more about personal connection, and then fit work in if it also adds to that. For example, a hackathon is a great example. Being able to come together to work on something, but you're building those interpersonal ties is huge. The other area is coming up with some out of the box ways to connect. It shouldn't feel forced. We've all been on those icebreaker calls that can be uncomfortable, and we're thinking about our answer, and we're focused more on how we're presenting ourselves than we are on actually connecting. Some of the most engaging asynchronous ways to connect that I've had where we're not all in person have been things that deal with who we are as people. For example, at Monarch this holiday season, instead of doing a Secret Santa, we did a Monarch cookbook. So we asked everybody to share their favorite recipe, because food is so universal. It's something everybody can relate to. And food carries a lot of positivity in memories that we have. And so what that did is it allowed people to share, for example, I shared my grandmother's twice baked potato recipe, and that can build more connectivity than a gift, as an example. So just thinking of small tweaks to already existing things that can have a much larger impact.
HR has changed from support function to strategic powerhouse, but traditional HR software hasn't caught up. 15Five's performance management platform helps your HR team discover where to take action and make a business impact. Find out how to maximize employee performance, engagement, and retention at 155.com or click the link in the show notes.
We were talking about our kids before this podcast, and my daughter, when she was in kindergarten, they made a cookbook, and every kindergartner had to write their own recipe, which you can imagine a kindergartner's recipe for anything is absolutely insane. Like, there is no logic to it of what is in there, which is part of what makes it so fun. But I look at that cookbook all the time. There is something about that personal connection that, why is this food so special to you? But there's always a story for someone behind it. And like, what a beautiful example of bringing that to your organization, your people, and creating a way for two people to connect and learn about each other's families and your cultures and the things that make us us that you don't get to see when you're not with one another. And that's such a cool idea and a great reminder to, think differently. So I want to talk to you a little bit now, Brittany, about kind of just your strategic vision as a people leader, your unique perspective, how you come in. You've talked about being really technical in your strategic approach. And so tell me a little bit of what does that actually mean for you and how's that showing up in your work?
I think in terms of numbers, it's what's always guided my decisions, how I approach situations, and might have been why I ended up majoring in math. I enjoyed it. So it's part of the way my brain operates. And how I translated that into the people team is I found early in my career that we were making decisions based on what we thought was right, instead of taking the time to invest into understanding the data behind what could make that the best decision. You know, an engagement survey is a perfect example. If we want to look at where we should invest our time, let's run an engagement survey. Let's see what people are talking to us about. Let's see what feedback they have. And then we have the data to support why we're investing that time and the impact that we think it's going to have. You know, additionally, one of the very first surveys I ever ran, separate to an engagement survey, was a benefits survey. It asked everything. We did not hold back. And what we did, instead of just getting the survey back, was we actually shared the results, not the raw results, of course, to protect confidentiality, but a summarized results of here's where we scored on everything. Here's what we're going to work on next. And here's what we're deprioritizing because we want to focus on those top priorities instead. I had no questions for 6 months about benefits. It was incredible because whenever anybody needed anything, they could go to where we had ran that survey. They could see the results and they could see the progress of what we've done based on that. And it also created much more of an appetite for people to participate in engagement surveys and in benefit surveys or any other type because they felt like they were being heard. So even when we're taking a data-driven approach to things, it still does have that human element. And I know that's kind of the theme of so many things I believe in, but it supports that. So I'm able to much more effectively lead my team in what our priorities are and how we're going to move into the next phase of growth because we have data to support us. And then the business starts to build that trust based on that data and based on our execution results.
Is that, well, data is just so incredibly powerful and at times can be really intimidating. I think for a lot of HR leaders of where do I start? What am I looking at? How do I split this? What are the tips that you would give for people who feel like, I don't know, like, how do I get better at this? I don't even know where to start.
Yeah, you know, it's amazing how powerful an Excel or a Google Sheet can be, right? Even just being able to translate large pieces of data into pivot tables. If there's just even one skill that someone in HR can learn early in their career on doing that, it can catapult you through the rest of your time because really that's what a lot of the data that we deal with does every day. And again, everything's intimidating when you're learning it for the first time. But the longer we shy away from it, or the more that we're afraid of it, the less we're going to have the ability to grow. And so by leaning in and saying, this is uncomfortable, which means I should spend time there, the more of a likelihood we're going to have an impact on ourselves, but also in the business that we're supporting.
Exactly. I think you have to lean into the data and what it is showing you. And, you know, when I think about the coaching I've given to other executive leaders, right? If someone came to me and said, I have a pitch for our CEO or the executive team, how should I put this together? I would tell them, where's your data? Why? Like those 5 whys, I would ask them to back up everything they're doing with data. And at times it can feel like for the people functions, that muscle isn't quite there yet of, okay, I'm going to go with this, but like maybe I have the data, maybe I don't. We should hold ourselves to that very same standard of when I make a pitch for a program, an initiative where we want to focus our time this year, it should be based on these insights, whether it's an engagement survey or your performance data. This is why I'm confident, because I know that this is what people are asking for. I can really target the right solutions to the right part of my populations. It puts that superpower behind everything you are trying to do. It eliminates a lot of that doubt with just data. The numbers are, in that way, like it's hard to argue with.
It is. And the other piece of advice I give too, and as I'm coaching people, because we say, lean into the data, have all your data ready, but don't show it all. That is overstimulating and overwhelming for somebody in a presentation. It's about showing the right data at the right time, but making sure that you know it in and out on the back end so that when questions come up in those pitches and those presentations, you can speak to the context or the next layer down of that data. And it's such an art and science, like so many other things in our space, but there's a huge opportunity to take the data that you have and present it in a way that is powerful and compelling. That's the art. The science is learning how to build the data in a way that you can do that.
That is the perfect descriptor of it. And you need to pick the data that also matters to the business, matters to your objectives. Any of us could write X many pages on an engagement survey results, but there's a lot of them that maybe you don't have a statistically significant population behind it. Maybe it's actually not connected to what you're doing. Maybe it's not connected to engagement, those results. It's finding those areas where there's those intersections and you can really confidently say, these are the 3 pieces you've got to think about. These are the areas we need to really dig in on, and then use that to fuel your priorities. What advice would you give for HR leaders who maybe need someone to get them more comfortable in an org? Like, do you think HR leaders should lean into other executives that they have or other resources in the company to build some of those skills? To your point, a pivot table can take you a long way. You can ride that pivot table for many, many years. You'll get a lot out of it.
You can. And eventually you can start to learn things like SQL or other, more advanced ways of looking at data. And one of the things that I did early on in my career is I never hesitated to ask for mentorship or support. It can feel uncomfortable and you feel as though you're wasting someone's time by asking for them to teach you something or to support you, when in reality, it is quite the opposite. Typically, people are so flattered that you would care that their expertise could be something that could help you grow, that they're happy to devote that time as long as, they're seeing you take it seriously and implement some of the things that you're learning and things like that. And in my early years at GitLab, my CFO was someone who was a huge champion for me just in being able to take opportunities. He supported me a ton and he taught me a lot as well. He would tell me exactly what data I might need on a pitch I've never done before. And then I'd go figure it out. I'd come back to him and he'd give me feedback. It took maybe 5 minutes for him to tell me what he wanted to see, but I asked the question. And sometimes asking the question can be just as powerful as anything else, right? If we don't ask, we'll never know. Otherwise, I go into this pitch, I have no idea what he's looking for, and I bomb because I don't have anything he's looking for. So it's small things like that. And, another mentor I had at GitLab was our chief revenue officer, who's now one of the partners up at a venture capital firm and doing amazing. And he had such a great business mind. And so being able to learn from him on a broader business perspective really helped me to partner in a different way, not at all data driven, totally 2 separate type of mentors, separate learnings that came from it. But again, I asked if they'd be willing to speak with me and help me. And now they're still 2 people that I would love to call on and be able to continue to learn from as they keep growing in their career. And I'm fortunate to be able to keep those connections.
So incredible. And it is just so important to kind of following the line that you had earlier. It's okay to say you don't know. It's also okay to ask a question of help me understand what you're looking for. What does it matter? What is a priority to you? Sometimes we can get so afraid, whatever it is, if it's our own imposter syndrome or our own fears or whatever voice recording is running through our mind. It's give people the benefit of a doubt. People are so much more interested in helping you and building those skills. I think in particular for people in the HR space, there's a lot of thoughts about what we do and who we are and the kind of people we are. Then we can already build this wall up for ourselves of who's going to want to help me? Why should I ask for this when I think a lot of people really want to see the strategic shift we're looking for in our own function. They want to help you grow. And there's probably someone who wants to ask you that same thing. We have to remember, we have a ton of insight and knowledge that people look to and might feel that same intimidation. So if we can model the vulnerability and the courage and the curiosity of like, I'm invested enough in myself and I'm going to be prepared to have a mentor. I'm not just going to show up randomly each week and like talk about, whatever things are happening outside of work, but these are the things I'm looking for, like actually be really actively involved in it.
Yeah. Well, and that's the key is if you're asking for someone's time for them to mentor you, they have to see that you want to grow, right? If you're doing it to try to get ahead or to get visibility, those are not at all the right reasons. It is all about what skills are you looking to obtain. And every mentorship also has a natural end date. There's only so much guidance someone can give you before you maybe have a different person that might be the best mentor for you, or a different area that you want to invest more time in. Maybe not. Maybe that's somebody that can be a partner for an extended period of time, but also being self-aware of what you're looking for in your learning and development path and just that journey. It can really help to make sure that those connections, that you're building, also they leave with such a positive perspective of who you are and how you incorporated what they were able to give you.
Exactly. And so now, Brittany, that you're leading bigger people functions, you're continuing to develop in your career. What's important for you right now as a people leader? What are the things that you're thinking about your own growth, your own well-being? I can imagine that even though you are a self-proclaimed builder, like love to go back to those small numbers, there's also a level of demand that comes with that. That's hard. And you've got other people in your life, other pets that also demand your attention. Like, what are some of the ways that you think about that and you prioritize your own development and growth?
Yeah, early in my career, I wanted to be everything to everyone in my career, but also in my life, right? I wanted to be the best wife. I wanted to be the best mom, the best dog mom, the best colleague at work, all the things. And I can't. And I know that. And that's okay. And so I have very strict boundaries in my day and how I structure my day. There are times when I'm at work and I'm working hard and I am the best colleague I can be. There are the moments where I have blocked in my calendar and I actually use my calendar as a forcing function for me, but also to help set those boundaries with my team to know why I might not be available. Where when I pick my kids up from school until I put them to bed at night, my oldest daughter and I are reading Harry Potter right now. And it is my favorite time of the day to sit and go into her imagination and into her world and show her something that was really fun for me when I was similar age as her. And being able to have that time that's uninterrupted. And then I have other blocks of time, but each of those are intentional. Each of those, I put the other piece out of my mind. I can't be the best mom when I'm at work. I have to focus on work. If I'm distracted thinking about carrying guilt or carrying any of the other very natural human emotions that we all have, it doesn't feel as though it's worth it to me. I'm able to compartmentalize and separate those things. And then there are some certain days where I can't be any of those things. I have to focus on me. And that's where I do call in for a sick day, a mental health day, whatever it is that I might need to prioritize myself in the balance of all of that. But being able to be at a company like Monarch where balance is prioritized and people also hold you accountable to that, someone seeing, hey, you've been working really hard on this, great job, well-deserved rest coming up, or I'm so excited for your vacation. Like having an environment where people are celebrating that also helps to retain those boundaries. But it really is such a personal journey to figure out what are those boundaries? How do we set them and how do we hold them?
Yeah. What's the activity that you do that is just for you? It's your recharge. It's your personal reset happy zone. So maybe as we wrap things up here, Brittany, let's do a little spotlight on Monarch Money. I want to hear a little bit more about your company. You said you're growing quickly, you're scaling this year. Talk to us about what is next and what is the role that the people function is playing in that growth journey and that impact for the next year.
Yeah, I mentioned a little bit throughout the call, but when I joined about 6 months ago, we had about 30 people and we're up to about 50 now, which in actual numbers is small growth, but goodness, the impact that it has to almost double in 6 months is amazing. And we're looking to rapidly expand from here. We have so many goals of what's ahead of us to become, bringing personal finance to people across the US, across Canada, to really understand that this can be a fun journey for you. Personal finance does not have to be something scary. It can be something collaborative. You can do this with our platform allows you to collaborate with your partner, to collaborate with your financial advisor. And it's just taking a different twist on bringing that financial advice and planning to households that couldn't afford it, otherwise. Not everybody is able to have that dedicated financial advisor that can guide you through all of those decisions. And by seeing everything in one place, you can empower yourself to do that with those you're collaborating with. And so what mission that we're on the people side is really to bring in people that are as passionate about that mission as we are internally. And we've been so fortunate that many of the team members that we've hired in the last, 6 months and before are users like myself and care deeply about the product and want to see it grow and want to see it develop. And we also want to make sure that we're bringing in people that really want to make an impact and put our customers and our members first, be able to really help us grow, not only internally, but just within the market on how we bring this financial wellness to people who need it most.
Yeah, I think that's so cool. What are some of the ways that Monarch, I guess, makes that clear for the people who are coming into your company? How do you kind of set the standard for what are you looking for? What is it going to be like when they join this journey with you?
A huge thing for us is that our recruiting process, we want you to get to know the people you'd be working with the closest in a way that is authentic to what type of job you'd be doing. So for example, one of the things we do is for some roles, we have work trials or take-home assignments that show you the type of projects or the type of issues you may be faced with. You're then able to chat with people about what that looks like internally. You're able to understand what is it that I would be motivated by being a part of Monarch. And also, for example, our engineering team, we have a document that outlines that we send out for how our engineers work together, the types of programming languages they use, how the code base intersects, the values of the engineering team. And it's something we'll be bringing out to all of the different functions as we build them. But being able to have that transparency on not only what you'll be doing, but how you'll be working, what values we have, what cultural pillars there are within the business to guide what we're doing and how we do it is the best way for us to just make sure that it's a match on both sides. Not just we're recruiting people, but we also want them to want to be here and want to have an impact.
To have that self-awareness to say, what is the motivator? Like, what is that thing that's going to get me sparked and excited? Is that the right fit here? I think that is so cool. So Brittany, tell our listeners, if they want to learn more about Monarch Money, they want to see who you're hiring, what are the roles, where can they find out more? And in the spirit of Harry Potter, what you're reading with your oldest right now, who is your top Harry Potter character?
I'm a classic Hermione girl, I have to say. I just always loved her. Maybe it's that I was a bit of a studious person when I was growing up as well, and just always found her approach. I always understood it. I was like, yes, they shouldn't have done that. And so I always loved her. And to find us at Monarch, visit our careers page, visit us on LinkedIn, on Reddit, on socials. We would love for you to check out the roles that we have open. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn as well, and include the subject line, the name of this podcast. And I'd love to connect with you and get to know you more, and just be able to see if there's opportunities that can lead to some really cool growth for both the business and for the people interested in joining.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Brittany, for your time and your insights today across the world of everything that happens in startup cultures, from how you think about data and impact to scaling culture to being a leader. I mean, there are just too many good things to take out of here to summarize it into one. I just really appreciate your time and vulnerability with us and helping our HR superstar community.
Likewise, it was a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much.
As an HR leader, you have a critical role in managing an organization's most valuable asset, its people. However, despite the importance of your role, other executives may not see the value of having HR leaders at the executive table. This is why we crafted the HR Outcomes Playbook. It's designed to help you close that gap and operate in a way that enlightens and excites the rest of the executive team and shows them that HR can provide value to an organization's bottom line. Get your copy at the link in the show notes now.